Hey guys, welcome back to more Malicious Compliance Reddit stories. In today's Ripestories video, what would you do if you came home from a long trip to find a giant swimming pool built right on top of your property line? My entitled neighbor thought that his government job meant he could steal my land and get away with it. Well, he dared me to stop him, but I maliciously complied with his demands, and it cost him everything. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is from r/neighbors from hell and is titled "Neighbors built into our property and made a huge mistake." Posted by user RightAdvisor19. So to cut a really long story short, our neighbors have French doors, and towards the end of last year we noticed them building a platform/ramp/steps into their garden. From what we could see though, it didn't look like it breached our boundaries, so we didn't want to make a fuss. We also could not get a proper look at it though, because we had to put a tall fence panel on top of the wall and add a few years ago to stop the kid and their mates leaning over and looking at us in our living room. Well then, cue, a few weeks later, we could see their dog leaning over our wall and barking at our cat. Small dog, so could not realistically be able to reach up and over unless this platform has come over the boundary and is raised a ridiculous amount off the ground. So then we took the fence panel down to get a better look, and lo and behold, they have built the platform against our wall, which is well inside the boundary of our house, so shouldn't have been used, nor is it designed to be a retaining wall. They have come over around 12 inches in width and 4 feet in length and over 4 feet in height. Basically, I can sit in my living room and they can stand on the platform and see directly in. So, since it was already built, we put in with planning permission with the council. They have come out to look, and whilst I cannot be sure what is happening, they have not responded to our emails yet, I've had the neighbors at the door screaming at me that it's got to be ripped out now. So it seems that the council agree it shouldn't have been built, nor would they get retro perspective planning permission. Which I'm quite surprised about, to be honest. I thought the council would just dawdle. Q, I am now getting screamed at every time I'm in my garden driving past them, slagging me off to all the neighbors, threatening to injure my cat. All because they shouldn't have built over the boundary in the bloody first place. They clearly thought we would just lie down and take it. The entitlement. And yeah guys, if some stupid entitled neighbor that apparently hates cats, so that makes him an awful person anyway, decided to build something on your private property, how would you have reacted? Honestly, these entitled folks just don't understand what private property means. Anyway, if you still enjoy the neighbor stories, please don't forget to like the video and maybe post a comment if you want to support real voice readers. Thank you so much. The next one is titled "Entitled Neighbor Built Pool Over My Property Line, so I made sure they could never use it." Posted a long time ago on r/MaliciousCompliance by user deleted. So a bit of background first, I work in consulting for mining operations in Indonesia, which means I spend months at a time in remote locations helping companies set up their operations. The money is good, but it means being away from home for extended periods. I live in a small town outside Jakarta where I own a property that I inherited. It's nothing too fancy, just a traditional house with a large yard surrounded by a concrete wall that clearly marks the property boundaries. My neighbors are this family who moved in about 2 years ago. The husband works for some kind of government ministry and his wife doesn't work at all. They have 2 teenage kids who are generally okay, but the parents, well, let's just say they have this attitude that they are better than everyone else in the neighborhood, and the husband especially acts like he owns the whole street because he has some kind of low-level government position. From day one, they made it clear that they thought my property was too big for just one person. They kept making comments about how I should sell them part of my land since I was away so much anyway, and I always politely declined and thought that was the end of it, but boy, was I wrong. The trouble started when I got assigned to this multi-month project in Kalimantan. It was a big contract, so I couldn't turn it down. And guys, I think I've heard that name before. I think it's some kind of like big island near Borneo or something. So either way, OP was pretty much far away from his home. Before leaving, I did what I always do. I asked my other neighbor, an elderly woman who's lived here for decades, to keep an eye on the place. And yeah, everything seemed fine for the first month. I would get occasional updates that the house was secure, no problems. And then around the 6-week mark, I started getting some weird messages from my elderly neighbor. She mentioned that there was a lot of construction noise coming from next door, but she couldn't see exactly what was happening yet. I didn't think much of it initially. I mean, people renovate their homes all the time, right? But then she sent me a photo that made my blood boil. Apparently there was a massive swimming pool under construction and it was clearly extending onto my property. I immediately tried calling my government ministry neighbor, but there was no answer. I tried several times over the next few days, but still nothing, so I called the local village head to report the situation and ask him to investigate. He promised to look into it, but you know how these things go in small communities. Everything moves at a glacial pace, especially when one party has government connections. Meanwhile, my elderly neighbor kept sending me updates. The construction was progressing rapidly. They had brought in a full crew and were working from dawn to dusk. The pool was taking shape and it was becoming increasingly obvious that a significant portion of it was on my land. So we are talking about at least more than 30% of the pool area crossing over the property line. I was stuck in the middle of nowhere in Kalimantan with limited internet and phone access, trying to manage this situation remotely. Every day, I would wake up to new photos showing more progress on this pool that was literally being built on my property without my permission. It was infuriating, but the worst part, when I finally managed to get through to the village head, he told me that my neighbor had actually come to him with some story about how I had given them verbal permission to use part of my land for their pool project. They claimed we had some kind of agreement before I left for work, but that was complete lies, but apparently they were convincing enough that the village head was not taking immediate action. I spent weeks trying to resolve this from thousands of kilometers away. I contacted a lawyer in Jakarta, but he said there wasn't much we could do until I returned and could assess the situation in person. Meanwhile, the construction continued. Every photo I received made me angrier. They were not just building a small kiddie pool. This was a full-size swimming pool with concrete decking, filtration equipment, the works, and they were treating my property like it was theirs. The breaking point came about 2 weeks before I was scheduled to return home. My neighbor sent me a photo of the completed pool, and yeah, I gotta say, it was beautiful, I'll give them that. Crystal blue water, nice tile work around the edges, even some landscaping, but the fact remained that nearly a third of it was sitting on my land. But here's where it gets even better. That same day, I received a message from someone in the neighborhood saying that my government neighbor was actually bragging about the pool to other people. He was telling everyone how he had negotiated with me to use part of my land and how I was too stupid to ask for proper compensation. He was actually proud of what he had done. That is when I knew I had to do something decisive when I got back. The 3 months finally ended and I flew back home. I will never forget walking into my yard and seeing that pool for the first time in person. Photos don't do justice to just how massive it was and how blatantly it crossed onto my property. The concrete decking extended a good 2 meters onto my side of the original property line. I knocked on their door that first day back. The wife answered and her reaction was priceless. She went completely pale when she saw me. She stammered something about how they thought I knew about the construction and quickly called for her husband. When he came to the door, he had this fake friendly expression and started going on about how nice it was that I was back and how they had taken care of the pool situation while I was away. He actually had the nerve to say that since I was gone so long, they figured I wouldn't mind them borrowing a bit of space. However, I kept my cool and simply told them that they had built their pool on my property without any permission and that we needed to discuss how to resolve this situation. But that is when his whole demeanor changed. He got this arrogant look and told me that I was mistaken about the property boundaries. He claimed that the area where their pool sat had always been unclear territory and that their pool construction had actually helped clarify who owned what. He said that since they had invested so much money in improvements to the land, they now had a stronger claim to it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This guy was literally trying to steal my land and then claim it was legally his because he had built something on it. But then he said something that really set me off. He looked me right in the eye, said that if I had a problem with the situation, I was welcome to sue them, but that would take years and cost me a fortune. He said that in the meantime they would continue to enjoy their pool and there was nothing I could do about it. That is when he made his fatal mistake though. He asked me that if I was going to be difficult about this, the only solution would be for me to either accept the new property boundaries or remove the pool myself. He said those were my only 2 options and that he was confident I wouldn't choose the second one because it would cost me more than the land was worth. Perfect. He had just given me exactly the compliance opportunity I needed. I spent the next few days doing research, and I went to the local land office and got certified copies of my property survey and the deed. I also had a new survey done by an official surveyor to document exactly where my property lines were and how much of the pool was on my land. The results were clear: about 30% of their pool was definitely on my property. Here's the thing though, I realized that my neighbor was partially right about one thing: a lawsuit would be expensive and time consuming, and even if I won, enforcing the judgment might be complicated given his government connections, but he had told me that I could remove the pool myself if I wanted to, and he had been very specific that those were my only two options. So I chose option 2, but not in the way he expected. I started making some calls to fencing contractors. In Indonesia, property owners have the absolute right to fence their land, and as long as the fence is on your own property, neighbors cannot do anything to stop you. I explained my situation to several contractors and most of them thought I was crazy, but one guy got it immediately. He was actually excited about the project. The plan was simple but beautiful. I was gonna build a fence that ran along exactly my property line. Not an ordinary fence, mind you, but a proper security fence with concrete posts and multiple strands of barbed wire, the kind of fence that you see around industrial facilities. The contractor and I carefully planned the route. The fence would start at the front corner of my property, run along the side boundary, and continue along the back. The beautiful part though was that the property line ran right through the middle of their pool. So my fence would go right through their pool area, about 1 meter above the water surface. I pulled all the permits I needed from the village office. Everything was completely legal since I was building on my own land. I even got the survey results certified by the local land office, so there would be no question about where the boundaries were at all. So I hired a crew of 6 workers and we began with the concrete posts first. The first few posts went up along the side of my property without attracting much attention, but when we started positioning posts that were clearly gonna run through the pool area, my neighbor came running out of his house. He was absolutely furious. He demanded to know what I was doing, and I calmly explained that I was building a fence on my property line, just like he had suggested. I reminded him that he had told me my options were to accept the new boundaries or remove the pool myself, and I had chosen to remove the part of the pool that was on my land. So he started yelling about how I couldn't possibly be serious, that this would destroy their pool and that I was being unreasonable. I just shrugged though and told him that I was following his advice exactly. He had said that I could remove the pool myself, and that's exactly what I was doing. The best part though was watching his face when he realized that my fence was not going around the pool or under it, it was going straight through it. The concrete posts were positioned so that the fence would run about 1 meter above the water surface, right through the middle of the pool area. He threatened to call the police, so I invited him to go ahead. When the local cops showed up, I had all my documentation ready: property deed, survey results, building permits, the works. The police looked at everything, walked the boundary line, and confirmed that I was building on my own property and I had all the proper permits. So my neighbor tried to argue that I was destroying their pool, but the police officer just looked at him and asked why he had built a pool on someone else's property in the first place, and that shut him up pretty quickly. Construction continued for the rest of the week. We set concrete posts every 3 meters along the entire boundary line. The posts that went through the pool area were positioned perfectly. They rose up from the pool decking, went about 2 meters high, and would soon be connected with multiple strands of barbed wire. The whole neighborhood came out to watch. It was like free entertainment for everyone. My elderly neighbor was absolutely delighted. She kept bringing the workers cold drinks and snacks, and she would update me throughout the day about how angry my government neighbor was getting. By Thursday, we had all the posts set and were ready to string the wire. That is when things got really interesting though. My neighbor's wife came over crying, begging me to stop the construction. She said they would pay to have their pool moved, that they would do whatever I wanted. Just please don't put barbed wire through their pool. I told her that was very generous, but her husband had been very clear about my options. She ran back to get her husband and he came storming over. He was red-faced and furious. He started yelling about how I was being ridiculous and that this was going too far, that we could work something out. I let him vent for a while and then I calmly reminded him of our previous conversation. I quoted his exact words back to him about how my options were to accept the new boundaries or remove the pool myself. I told him I had thought about it carefully and decided that his advice was sound, and then he tried a different approach. He said that maybe they had made a mistake with the property boundaries and perhaps we could negotiate some kind of compensation for the land use. He suggested they could pay me rent for the portion of my property their pool occupied, and I told him that was an interesting proposal indeed, but unfortunately, he had already been very clear that negotiation was not an option. He had specifically said that my choices were to accept the new boundaries or remove the pool, so I did a mix of both basically. The wire stringing began on Friday morning. We started with the regular boundary sections and worked our way towards the pool area. By lunchtime we had reached the first post that was positioned in the pool decking, and that is when the true beauty of the project became apparent. The fence did not just cross over the pool, it created a barrier that made the pool completely unusable. The barbed wire ran in multiple strands about 1 meter above the water's surface right through the middle of the swimming area, so you couldn't swim in that pool anymore, you couldn't even really stand in it safely because of the wire overhead. The fence had effectively turned their beautiful swimming pool into a decorative water feature that nobody could actually use. My neighbor watched from his window as we strung the wire through his pool area. I could see him on the phone constantly, probably trying to find some way to stop the construction, but we had every permit we needed and were working entirely on my own property. And then when it was complete, it was a thing of beauty, a proper security fence with concrete posts and multiple strands of barbed wire running exactly along my property line from front to back. The section that went through the pool area was particularly impressive. The neighborhood reaction was incredible. People were walking by just to see this fence that went through a swimming pool. Someone even took photos that ended up being shared all over local social media. My government neighbor became something of a local celebrity, but not in the way that he had hoped. Saturday morning, my neighbor came over with a completely different attitude. He was humble, apologetic, and desperate. He admitted that they had made a serious mistake and asked what it would take to resolve the situation. And I told him I appreciated his change in tone, but that he had been very clear about my options during our previous discussion. He had specifically ruled out negotiation, and since I followed his advice, I was satisfied with the outcome. He offered to pay for relocating the fence, but I pointed out that the fence was exactly where it needed to be, on my property line. Moving it would mean giving up my legal rights to my own land, which did not seem like a good idea, and he then offered to pay for removing the entire pool and rebuilding it entirely on his own property. I told him that was certainly his right as a property owner, but that it wasn't really my concern anymore. I had solved the problem of unauthorized construction on my land just as he had suggested. The situation got even better over the next few weeks though. The pool, which had cost them a significant amount of money to build, was now completely useless. They couldn't swim in it, they couldn't even really clean it properly because of the wire overhead, and couldn't even enjoy looking at it because the fence posts and barbed wire dominated the view. Worse yet, the pool still required maintenance. Furthermore, it became this expensive, useless water feature that served as a daily reminder of their attempted land grab. The neighborhood dynamics changed completely too. Everyone now knew the story of how they had tried to steal my land while I was away working, and how their own arrogance had led to their pool becoming unusable. My government neighbor's reputation in the community was completely shot. About a month after the fence was completed, I was sitting in my yard reading when I heard a commotion from next door. I looked over and saw that they were draining their pool. Apparently they had finally accepted that it was never gonna be usable as long as my fence was there. But here's the thing though, even with the pool drained, they still had this massive concrete structure taking up most of their backyard, with my barbed wire fence running right through the middle of it. It looked absolutely ridiculous, and I heard through neighborhood talk that they were getting quotes for demolishing the pool and rebuilding it entirely on their own property, but the costs were astronomical. Not only would they have to pay for demolition and removal of the existing pool, but they'd also have to pay for new construction, and their remaining yard space was much smaller. My government neighbor's situation at work apparently became uncomfortable too. Having a viral story about your failed attempt to steal land does not look good when you work in government, especially when the story includes details about how you tried to use your position to intimidate someone. About 6 months after the fence went up, I noticed that there was a for sale sign in front of their house, but I was not surprised. Living next to a constant reminder of your failed land grab in a house where the backyard featured a drained swimming pool with barbed wire running through it could not have been more pleasant. The house sat on the market for a long time. Apparently potential buyers buyers were put off by the weird pool situation and the story behind it. Plus, any buyer would either have to live with the unusable pool or pay to have it demolished, which added significant cost to the purchase. They eventually sold it, but I heard through the neighborhood that they had to accept a much lower price than they had hoped for. The new owners seem nice enough, they introduced themselves properly and have been respectful of property boundaries. One of the first things the new owners did was have the old pool demolished and removed, and it was quite a production. A while with heavy machinery to break up all that concrete and haul it away. I did feel a little bad watching all that work and money being undone, but then I remembered how arrogant my former neighbor had been about stealing my land, so I was happy about that pool being gone and me having that part of my property back. And yeah guys, now my opinion about this story, you just gotta imagine trying to sell a house where the backyard looks like a joint venture between a luxury resort and a maximum security prison. No wonder that that place sat on the market forever according to OP. You just gotta imagine the headline, "Beautiful 4-bedroom home features a spacious backyard with a custom, half-demolished concrete pit bisected by a high-tension security wire." The discount these entitled folks had to take on that sale must have been brutal, but then again, if you ask me, they absolutely deserved it. Talk about a self-inflicted financial disaster. Honestly, there's nothing more satisfying than watching an arrogant bully realize they completely played themselves. And that is exactly what happened here. And now let's read a comment from Reddit. This one said, "Obviously, your neighbor is a massive a-hole for stealing your land and trying to use his government job to intimidate you, and he 100% deserved to lose that pool. But honestly, putting barbed wire through the middle of a residential backyard, you suck too. You created a massive safety hazard and an absolute eyesore for the entire neighborhood just to prove a point to him. What if a kid fell in and got tangled in the wire? You should have taken him to court, forced him to pay for the demolition legally, and then sued for damages." And yeah guys, let me know in the comments what you think about this. What would you have done? And another comment from Reddit said, "I'm a surveyor, you have no idea how common this actually is. People always think that adverse possession kicks in the second they pour concrete, or they assume that because they paid a contractor, the land magically belongs to them now. So good on OP for going straight to the local land office and getting the official survey certified before digging the post holes. If you had not done that, the cops absolutely would have called it a civil matter and made you stop construction." And the next one is a funny story from r/MaliciousCompliance, which is titled "Coffee Cup Drama at Work." So this happened at a college cafeteria where I worked. We used to have to-go cups, but management wanted to save money, so they got rid of the to-go cups and only cups available now were the regular diner-style ceramic coffee cups. And well, since they took the cups away, I would stop at the cafe on campus and get a to-go coffee free because I was an employee and because it was a nice large size and would stay hot longer. Our manager in the cafeteria did not like me using the cafe cups and told me that she didn't want me to use them. She said the students would be upset if they saw me with a to-go cup and they had to use the reusable ones. Nonsense, of course, but she was snotty and just liked to jerk around the employees she did not like. So one morning I decided to jerk back. I went to a convenient mart where they sold the same coffee and used the same to-go cups. I get to work and you have to know that this boss had eyes in her butt, one of my mom's favorite expressions, and she would be nowhere to be found, but if you did the slightest thing wrong, she would come out of nowhere at you. And well, I got to work, walked around holding my cup so it was really noticeable, and here she comes barreling at me and says in her best snotty voice, "Didn't we have a conversation about coffee cups?" I said yes we did, but this one was from Sanaco and presented her with my receipt. Oh, the look on her face was priceless. It was literally the best day at work ever. And yeah guys, what can I say? Sometimes it is worth the money to be petty. Thank you for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.